Hi, my name is Elise. I wasn't supposed to be home that day, but something told me to come back early. Maybe instinct, maybe something deeper. What I found still won't leave me. My grandmother, soaked in cold rain, sitting outside like an afterthought, eating from the dog's bowl while my family laughed around the BBQ pit. No one noticed. Or worse, maybe they did. And that was only the beginning. They said she was slipping, that she needed to be managed. But when I found forged documents, erased signatures, and bank accounts with my name missing, I realized something bigger had been happening all along. Was it care? Or control? And how long had my family been preparing to erase her? Erase me? Do you really know what goes on behind the curtain of your own family? I didn't plan to come home early that day. It wasn't like me to leave work on a whim, but my last patient had canceled, and something in me, call it instinct, call it exhaustion, told me to go home. The rain had been steady all morning, painting the small town of Ashbury in streaks of gray, the kind of weather that made you want to crawl under a blanket and pretend the world didn't exist. As I turned onto our street, the familiar sight of my childhood home greeted me. A two-story colonial with navy shutters and a backyard that had seen decades of family barbecues, Easter egg hunts, and whispered arguments behind closed doors. I noticed smoke curling from the backyard grill. Laughter floated through the air like perfume. Someone had the Bluetooth speaker going again. Classic rock, probably Dad's old playlist. No one knew I was coming. I parked and got out, not bothering to grab an umbrella. The rain wasn't the heavy kind, just enough to soak you slowly, the kind that made you feel every step. My shoes made soft slaps on the wet concrete as I headed up the front path. At first, I thought it was a shadow, just a shape slumped near the porch railing, a pile of blankets, or maybe a forgotten lawn cushion. But as I got closer, the outline became clearer. Frail shoulders, a thinning head of gray hair, damp and clinging to the nape of her neck. And then, the bowl. My feet stopped moving. My lungs forgot their purpose. There she was, my grandmother, Henrietta Vale, crouched on the edge of the porch, knees drawn up like a child, soaked to the bone, eating dog food. She didn't see me right away. Her fingers, shaking, plucked at the soggy bits in the metal bowl, lifting them slowly to her mouth like it was nothing out of the ordinary. I stood there for a heartbeat too long, frozen in the most horrific stillness. Then I ran. "Grandma!" I gasped, my voice cracking. She flinched. Her eyes widened, and she looked up at me like I'd caught her doing something shameful. She didn't speak right away, just stared. I dropped to my knees in the wet, my jeans absorbing every drop. My coat was off my shoulders in seconds and wrapped around hers, though it barely covered half her body. "Who did this?" I whispered, holding her arms gently. "What happened?" Her lips trembled. "Don't tell them," she murmured. "I was hungry." Her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. Barely a whisper, but it shattered something in me. I looked toward the front door. Locked. Of course it was. I stood and pounded on it 3, 4, 5 times. Nothing. The laughter from the backyard kept coming, louder now, as if the people I shared blood with had all agreed to pretend the front of the house didn't exist. I pounded again. I tried the knob, jiggled it like I hadn't already confirmed it was locked. No footsteps approached. No one cared. Behind me, Grandma shifted. She was trying to sit up straighter, trying to smooth down her soaked sweater, like presentation mattered at a time like this. "She told me not to cause trouble," she said, almost to herself. "Said I ruined the vibe." My stomach twisted. "Who told you that?" She hesitated. "Your mother." I closed my eyes just for a second. I needed that second to keep myself from screaming. "She said I took a plate that wasn't for me," Grandma added quietly. "Said it was for someone important. She told me I embarrassed the family." My hands clenched into fists at my sides. The dog food, the rain, the locked door. My mother was laughing back there, probably sipping wine and making comments about someone else's potato salad, while the woman who raised her sat out here like a stray animal. Grandma coughed, a deep rattle in her chest. I moved to help her up, but she shook her head. "Let me sit," I don't want to fall. I sat down beside her. We didn't say anything for a while. The rain softened into a mist. I stared out at the backyard lights, blurry through the haze, listening to the occasional clang of tongs and the fake joy in those familiar voices. They left you out here, I said. It wasn't a question. Grandma sighed. They didn't want me inside. I wiped my face, not sure if it was rain or tears, probably both. This isn't over, I told her. I promise you, it's not over. She didn't respond, but I felt her lean slightly toward me, just enough to know she'd heard. Eventually, I stood and helped her to her feet. She wobbled, but I steadied her, my arm around her shoulder. Her fingers gripped mine like lifelines. We walked together along the side of the house, past the hedges and the rusted hose that always tangled itself no matter how carefully it was wound. The grass squished beneath our feet. The laughter got louder with each step. And as we rounded the corner and approached the back gate, I saw them, my family. My mother, Vera, in her lemon-yellow cardigan, holding court like always. My cousin Bryn, taking selfies near the grill. Zinnia, my niece, playing near the patio lights. They were all there, all pretending this was a normal day. I didn't plan to make a scene, but that was before I saw the way my mother looked at me, like I was the real problem. Her silence told me everything, and it wasn't just about Grandma. It was about all of us she couldn't control. The second I stepped onto the patio, the music dimmed beneath the weight of awkward glances and shifting feet. No one came to greet me. I didn't expect confetti, but a nod? A simple, "Hey, Elise." Apparently that was too much. Grandma leaned against me, wrapped tightly in my jacket, her hair still damp, her breath short. I scanned the yard. My cousin Bryn was mid-selfie, pouting with her cocktail in hand. She caught sight of me, eyes wide, and then, just as quickly, turned her back. The sliding glass door was just ahead. I guided Grandma toward it, my shoes squeaking on the damp patio stones. Through the glass, I saw a full spread, ribs glistening with sauce, bowls of pasta salad, paper plates stacked high. My stomach twisted. I knocked. A beat passed. I knocked again, harder. Inside, Bryn looked up. Our eyes locked. I tilted my head slightly, silently begging her to open the door. She hesitated. Then, as if someone flipped a switch, she drew the curtain shut. Just like that, the world behind the glass pretended we weren't there. Grandma's grip on my hand tightened. She didn't say a word. We stood there for what felt like a minute, maybe two. No one came. The wind stirred. My jaw clenched so tight I thought I might crack a molar. Finally, the side door creaked open. "Aunt Elise?" It was Zinnia, her little face peeking out with innocent confusion. She blinked up at me, then at Grandma, and then smiled like everything was just fine. "I thought you weren't coming." I crouched slightly, speaking softly. "Sweetheart, did someone tell you not to let Grandma in?" Zinnia nodded, as if repeating a routine. "Mom said she's acting weird again, that we shouldn't let her inside, because she might fall or ruin the party." Ruin the party. My throat burned. I forced a smile and said, "Thank you for opening the door, honey." She opened it wider and stepped back. I led Grandma through the kitchen entryway, past a counter full of open wine bottles and melting ice in solo cups. We walked into a house that had once smelled like cinnamon and pot roast, but now reeked of vanilla candles and too much surface disinfectant. I sat Grandma down at the kitchen table, pulled out a towel from the drawer, and started patting her shoulders dry. Her lips were slightly blue. I rubbed her hands between mine. The temperature difference between out there and in here felt like an accusation. That's when I heard the heels. "Vera?" "My mother." "Elise?" she called, her voice already laced with disapproval. "What are you doing?" She stopped short when she saw Grandma, wet and hunched in the chair. "You brought her in?" she hissed. "I didn't realize your house had a no old women allowed policy," I said flatly. "She chose to go outside," Vera said, already reaching for a dish towel, not to help Grandma, but to clean the wet floor under her feet. "She said she needed air." "She was eating from the dog's bowl," I said. That stopped her, if only for a moment. She looked at me, long, cold, and said, "Better that than making a mess in the kitchen again." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. None came. "That's what you're going with?" I asked. "That she's a hazard now?" Vera looked exhausted, as if I were the one causing her grief. "Elise, she's not herself lately. You haven't been around. You don't know how difficult she's become." I know she didn't deserve to be locked outside in the rain. She wasn't locked out. She wandered. You know she does that. I knocked twice. Bryn saw me. She shut the curtain. Vera scoffed. "You're reading into things. It's not always about you." I stepped closer. "No, it's about her. And you don't get to rewrite this just because the truth makes you uncomfortable." Vera narrowed her eyes. "Don't start." "I'm already started." The kitchen was quiet now. The laughter from outside dimmed. Maybe someone turned down the music. Maybe they were finally listening. Vera folded her arms. "You're making a scene." "No," I said. "You made this scene. I'm just refusing to ignore it." Her nostrils flared. "Your grandmother has been declining. She can't be trusted to care for herself. She forgets things. She breaks things. She tried to microwave aluminum foil last week." "She's 78, not helpless. She remembers who I am. She remembered your birthday last month. She made that peach cobbler you love, and you didn't even touch it." Vera's lips pressed into a thin line. "She made that with her own hands," I continued. "And you threw it out because it wasn't presentation ready. She saw that, Mom. She didn't say anything, but she saw it." "This is not the time," Vera snapped. "We have guests." I stepped aside. "Then tell them why the guest of honor was in the rain, eating Purina." Her face changed. Just slightly. A flicker of panic. "I'm going to clean this up," she said quietly, brushing past me. She didn't look back at Grandma. I turned to see that Grandma had been watching the whole exchange. She didn't speak. Her eyes were glassy, but she gave me the smallest nod, just enough to tell me she understood I was trying. The rest of the afternoon blurred. The party didn't stop. It resumed around us. More drinks, more pictures. Someone lit candles even though it was only 4 p.m. and the rain had stopped. The house buzzed with energy I didn't recognize anymore. I sat with Grandma in the den, away from the noise. I made her a sandwich and warmed a blanket in the dryer. She smiled when I tucked it around her, but there was a sadness to her that hadn't been there before. A weight behind her eyes. And as I watched my family pretend none of this had happened, a quiet understanding settled over me. This wasn't just today. This wasn't about one rainy afternoon or one cruel oversight. This was the way they'd always been. They didn't forget her. They chose not to see her. And if they could do that to her, what had they done to me? I held the phone in my hand, the contact name, Doris Clem, glowing softly on the screen, but I didn't press call yet. Instead, I looked up at the kitchen, at Grandma quietly sipping tea from the same mug I used as a child, at the silence that stretched uncomfortably between the clinks of silverware and distant laughter from the yard. The air inside felt stale, heavy. A few minutes had passed since my mother walked away, dismissing both the confrontation and the woman who raised her. I glanced over my shoulder to see if anyone would walk in and say something, anything, but the only sound was the muffled playlist still humming through the speaker outside. I tucked my phone into my back pocket and turned back to Grandma. She was trying not to make a mess, carefully placing the mug back on its coaster, smoothing the napkin on her lap, even though no one else here used one. Her hands were still trembling slightly. I reached for a towel, dabbed at her sweater again. "You warm enough?" I asked gently. She nodded but didn't look at me. "It's fine, honey. I'm just embarrassed." That word gutted me. She was embarrassed, not them. Not the people who locked her outside and laughed over ribs and red wine. Her. I tried to swallow the lump rising in my throat, pretended to stir her tea again just to keep my hands busy. The storm outside had passed, but the clouds inside hadn't moved. Just then, I heard her footsteps. Mom reappeared in the doorway, arms crossed, mouth tight. "Elise," she said, her voice measured. "We need to talk. Alone." I straightened. Anything you want to say to me? You can say in front of her. Vera sighed like I'd asked her to solve world peace. You're making this into something it's not. She wanted to be outside. You're reading it all wrong. She was outside, in the rain, eating from a dog bowl, I said flatly. That's not reading it wrong, that's calling it what it is. She's been confused lately, Elise. You haven't seen it. You don't know what it's like dealing with her every day. That landed. For a moment, I said nothing. She was right about one thing. I hadn't been around as much. My job kept me busy. The city was hours away. I visited when I could, but maybe not enough. Still, I looked back at my grandmother, and then at my mother, and it hit me hard. She wasn't confused. She was discarded. She's not losing her mind, I said. You are. Your empathy, your decency. They're slipping. Fast. Vera narrowed her eyes. You always have to be the one who points fingers. Always the self-righteous one, like you didn't spend years running away. There it was, the venom. The years of resentment that lived just beneath the surface of her calm. I didn't respond. I just picked up Grandma's now empty mug, refilled it with warm water from the kettle, and brought it back to her. Her eyes met mine with quiet gratitude. Don't treat me like I'm the villain, Vera said, still standing in the doorway. You always do this, turn everything into drama. Then stop giving me scripts to work with. Her lips parted in shock, but she had no comeback. She turned and left, the doorframe swallowing her like a stage curtain. I sat down next to Grandma again, breathing slower now. Do you remember when I was little? I asked. And you used to tell me that I should only speak when it truly mattered? She smiled faintly. I remember. I think I misunderstood that, I said. I think I waited too long to speak. She reached for my hand, covering it with hers. You're speaking now. I nodded, blinking hard. Later that afternoon, the house felt like it had returned to autopilot. The family outside laughed, clinked their glasses. The curtain Bryn had drawn earlier was still closed. I walked toward the window and peeked out. The world behind the glass might as well have been a different planet. Bryn posed again for another selfie, pouting with a drink in hand. Behind her, Uncle Martin was balancing a beer on his head to make the kids laugh. My cousin Jenny was dancing with her toddler to some throwback 80s song. It was as if nothing had happened, as if a woman hadn't been left out in the cold just hours earlier, as if I hadn't screamed silently in every room of this house since I was 12, invisible. I stepped away from the window. Grandma, I said, coming back to the kitchen, I won't let them do this to you again. She didn't reply with words, just reached out and gave my hand a soft squeeze. That gesture was louder than anything I could have said. Evening crept in slowly, and I helped her get ready for bed upstairs. Her room hadn't changed much since I was young. Same floral bedspread, same lamp with the little ceramic rabbits at its base. She brushed her hair, then let me braid it gently like she used to do for me. I tucked her in and kissed her forehead. Sleep well, Grandma. She looked at me and said, Don't let them put me somewhere. It was the first time she said it outright. I won't, I promised. I stepped out of the room, closing the door softly behind me, then walked down the hall to the guest bedroom, the one I used to sleep in during summers. I sat on the edge of the bed, pulled out my phone again. The screen was still lit with the name I hadn't yet called. Doris Clem. My thumb hovered for a moment. I exhaled through my nose and hit call. If anyone remembered who my grandmother used to be, it would be Doris. The phone rang twice before Doris picked up. Her voice on the other end was a familiar comfort, softened by age but still crisp with purpose. Elise, is everything all right, honey? There was a pause on my end. The question was so simple, so ordinary, but it made my chest tighten. I just needed to talk, I said. About Grandma, can I come over? There was no hesitation in her reply. Of course. I just pulled some lemon cookies out of the oven, still warm. Come on by. The walk from my house to Doris's wasn't far, but the rain had picked up again, not as harsh as earlier. just a steady drizzle that seemed to match the weight sitting in my chest. The kind of rain you didn't mind walking through when your mind was louder than the weather. When I knocked on her door, it opened almost immediately. Doris Clem looked exactly the same as the last time I saw her. Silver hair pulled into a bun, reading glasses perched low on her nose, and that same deep pink cardigan she always wore when it got cold out. "Elise," she said, ushering me in with a warm hug. "You look exhausted." I managed a tired smile and stepped into her living room, which smelled like baked citrus and old books. The fireplace was crackling gently, casting soft shadows against the wood-paneled walls. She led me to the sofa, handed me a warm mug, and sat across from me in her armchair, the one with the frayed floral fabric and a knit blanket tossed over the back. "I saw your mom earlier," she said casually. "Looked like she was hosting a party fit for the country club." I nodded, sipping the tea. It was supposed to be a family gathering, but something happened. Doris waited, patient as ever. She locked Grandma outside, in the rain, and when I found her, she was eating dog food off the porch. Doris's hand froze halfway to her mouth. The look on her face went from confusion to pure disbelief. "You're kidding." "I wish I was." She set her tea down with care and leaned forward. "That doesn't surprise me. But it still hurts to hear." "You said that before. What did you mean?" I asked. Doris gave me a long, searching look, as if weighing what to say. Then she sighed. "Henrietta wasn't always this quiet. When I first moved to Ashbury in the late 70s, she was the one who welcomed me. She had her hands in everything: school board, library drives, after-school programs. She built the community pantry with her own 2 hands, you know." I blinked. I hadn't known that. "She used to run a tutoring program in her garage," Doris continued. "Kids lined up down the block. Your mother was one of them." I swallowed hard, unsure what to say. "She was fierce, your grandmother. In the best way. She wasn't loud, but when she spoke, people listened. She had a gift for making you feel seen." That sentence clung to me. "I've never seen my mom talk about her like that," I said. "It's like she's ashamed of her." Doris leaned back, sighing again. "Your mom, Vera, always had a chip on her shoulder, wanted to be seen as important. She thought your grandmother was too small town, that she made everything about charity, community. Vera always wanted to climb the ladder. Henrietta wanted to build the ladder for others." The difference had never felt clearer, and it made the anger in me twist into something deeper: grief. "She didn't shrink," Doris said quietly, placing her hand over mine. "She was shrunk by people who stopped seeing her." I stared down at our hands. "I see her." Doris squeezed my fingers. "Then fight for her, while there's still time." I stayed a bit longer, mostly in silence, listening to the rain tap against the windows. The fire crackled. It felt like the world had stopped for a moment, letting me breathe again. When I returned home, the house had quieted some. The party was winding down. A few cars were already pulling out of the driveway. I slipped through the front door, unnoticed, and walked straight to the kitchen. There it was, on the floor near the back door, Grandma's metal dog bowl. I didn't touch it right away. I just stared at it. The inside was still wet from the rain, a few soggy pieces of kibble stuck to the rim. I bent down, picked it up, walked to the trash, and tossed it in. I heard the clatter echo in the bin, sharp and final. In the pantry, I found some chicken stock and noodles. I got out Grandma's favorite pot, the one with the faded sunflowers on the side, and started making soup the way she used to. No shortcuts, everything done with intention. While it simmered, I went upstairs and opened the cedar chest at the end of my bed. Folded neatly inside was a blanket, pale blue with little ducks printed along the trim. She'd made it for me when I was 6. I brought it down and draped it over the chair in the den. When the soup was ready, I ladled it into the fine china bowl that had sat unused for years, the one usually saved for holidays. I set the bowl down gently on the coffee table next to the blanket. Grandma was napping in her chair when I entered the room. Her breathing was steady, but when I placed a hand on her shoulder, she stirred. "Elise?" she murmured. Dinner's ready. She opened her eyes and blinked up at me. Did they leave? Most of them, I said. The important ones stayed. She smiled, slow and tired. I helped her sit up, placed the bowl in her lap, and sat beside her as she took the first spoonful. Halfway through, she set the spoon down and looked at me. Her eyes were clearer than they'd been in hours. They said if I don't sign soon, they'll move me, she whispered. The warmth in the room drained in an instant. Move you where? I asked, though I already suspected. Someplace where I won't disturb guests anymore. I stood and walked to the window. The yard was quiet now. The string lights were still glowing softly. Plates left behind, chairs knocked slightly out of place. I took a breath, turned back to her. You're not going anywhere. She didn't respond, but the look she gave me was all I needed. Later, as night fully took over and the house settled into its usual creaks and hums, I found myself outside again. The sky was still cloudy, but the rain had stopped. I walked toward the patio where earlier my family had laughed like nothing was wrong, and I stood there, in the middle, hands steady, voice strong. Mom, I said, loud enough for the wine glasses to stop clinking. Can we talk? The moment I said it, every conversation on the patio died mid-sentence. Forks hovered, frozen mid-air. Wine glasses stilled in hands. My mother stood at the far end of the backyard, flanked by her sisters and a few of their respectable friends from her gardening club. She turned to face me slowly, like I was the unexpected guest no one remembered inviting. Her face tightened, but she managed a measured smile as she walked toward me, glass of Pinot Grigio in hand, held just high enough to pretend the tension wasn't settling thick over everything. Elise? She said, low but pointed. Now's not the time. I think it is, I replied, folding my arms. You made time to humiliate Grandma. I'm making time to talk about it. Someone coughed behind me. A chair scraped. Vera's expression shifted to annoyance, masked as concern. We have guests. You're making a scene, she said through her teeth. I'm not the one who locked a 78-year-old woman outside, I replied. In the rain, during your family party. Her jaw clenched. This is not for public conversation. I stepped forward. Are you trying to move her out? Is that what this is about? Her eyes narrowed. You don't understand what's going on. Then explain it. She's been slipping, my mother said flatly. You wouldn't know, because you only visit when it's convenient, but I see it every day. The forgetfulness, the messes. It's not safe anymore. You mean it's not convenient for you anymore, I shot back. Elise, her voice turned sharp. She almost left the oven on all night last week. She flooded the laundry room. She wandered out into the street. She was standing on the porch, I interrupted, because she thought she wasn't welcome inside. You told her she was ruining the atmosphere, and she believed you. People were watching now. A few of our cousins had gathered near the grill, pretending not to listen, but their faces told a different story. Even Bryn had stopped mid-pose, her phone now at her side. She understands everything you're saying, I continued. She just doesn't understand why you stopped treating her like family. Vera turned her back on me and walked toward the table, signaling the discussion was over. But it wasn't. Then, right on cue, Bryn's phone made a loud ding. Several people glanced down at their own devices. Murmurs started spreading like wildfire. What the? Someone whispered. I turned to Bryn, whose screen was still open to a live stream, our family party, public to anyone with a link. In the top corner, a flood of real-time comments was still rolling in. Who's the old lady outside? Why is she eating from a pet bowl? She looks cold. WTF is going on here? And then, the one that hit like a bullet. Why is she sitting in the rain while you're eating ribs? Vera's head snapped toward Bryn. Bryn's eyes widened. I didn't know it was public, she stammered. I just meant to send it to the family group. Turn it off! Vera barked, snatching the phone. Too late. The truth had already been broadcast to the world. The blood drained from Vera's face as she saw the flood of outrage. Her wine glass shook slightly in her hand before she set it down hard on the table. Inside, she said to me. Now. She stormed into the house, and after a second of hesitation, I followed. Inside, she spun on her heel, shutting the door behind me with more force than necessary. "You've embarrassed this family enough," she hissed. "You embarrassed yourself," I snapped. "I just didn't let you bury it. You think I enjoy this?" she snapped, voice rising. "Do you think I wanted to be the one responsible for her declining health? I didn't sign up to be her nursemaid." "No," I said. "You signed up to be her daughter, and at some point, that stopped being enough for you." Vera's eyes flared. "She's losing it, Elise. She thinks it's 1984 half the time. You weren't here. You don't get to judge me." "I saw her today," I said, voice steady. "She knew exactly who I was. She told me how scared she was. She said if she didn't sign whatever you put in front of her, you'd send her away." My mother laughed, short and bitter. "She's manipulating you, just like she always does." I stepped closer. "She's not losing her mind. She's losing you." There was a beat of silence, just the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the kitchen clock. "I'm done tiptoeing around this," I said. "If you try to force her into some facility she hasn't agreed to, if you make her sign anything she doesn't understand, I won't let it slide." She crossed her arms, still postured like she had control. "You never had the backbone to stand up to me. What makes you think anyone will take you seriously now?" I took one slow step forward, lowering my voice. "Because I found her in the rain, and that's all anyone needs to know." I didn't wait for her reply. I turned, walked down the hallway, and made my way upstairs, my heart pounding, not from fear, but from clarity. Something inside me had shifted, and there was no turning back. When I got to my old bedroom, I sat on the floor beside the antique desk I used as a teenager. My fingers traced the edge of the bottom drawer, the one with the tiny brass lock that used to hold my journals, letters, secrets I never wanted shared. I reached under the desk and pried open the panel I had long ago wedged shut with a hairpin. The old key was still there, taped to the back of the drawer with yellowed masking tape. I opened it. Inside were old documents, a few childhood drawings, a letter from Dad from a year before he passed. And then, something else. A manila envelope. I opened it carefully. Inside were notarized forms, property documents. One of them was signed by Henrietta, but it wasn't her handwriting, and the ink was fresh. My pulse quickened as I read through them. Everything was detailed, typed out professionally, transfer of ownership, power of attorney, all in Vera's name. My chest tightened. I sat back against the desk, documents in hand, the truth finally laid out in black and white. The thing about growing up in a house full of polished surfaces is that you learn how to find what people are hiding beneath the shine. I stayed seated on the floor for several long minutes after reading the documents, the silence of my old room closing around me like a heavy blanket. The air tasted stale, part dust, part memory, and the only sound was the ticking of the same clock that used to wake me up for school 2 decades ago. There in my lap were the truths no one thought I'd ever see. Property transfer forms with Grandma's name scribbled out and my mother's written in. Signatures that didn't look like Grandma's at all. One form even had a notary block already filled out, but no witness name. The date? 2 weeks ago, right around the time Vera started pushing Grandma harder, becoming more urgent about her paperwork. My hands trembled, but not from fear. It was fury now, not explosive, not shouting, but slow, controlled. That quiet kind of anger that sits low in your gut and tells you, this isn't just wrong, it's personal. I took pictures of every page, front and back, scanning them with my phone's app. I double-checked that they were saved to the cloud and a backup folder. I labeled them Henrietta, Estate Docs. Then I locked everything back in the drawer and stood up. Downstairs, the house had gone still. I assumed most of the guests had trickled out by now. From my window, I could see only 2 cars in the driveway, one of them Bryn's. The string lights out back still glowed, casting soft shadows on the fence. The air smelled like grilled meat and wilting hydrangeas. I took a deep breath and walked down the hallway, past Grandma's room. Her door was cracked open. I peeked in and saw her sleeping peacefully beneath the blue duck-printed blanket I'd given her earlier. A sense of urgency stirred in my chest. I needed to act now, while she was still under this roof. In the hallway, I paused outside the living room. And that's when I saw it. A new family portrait, framed and mounted on the wall. There was Mom, center stage, one hand on my brother's shoulder, her other resting lightly on Zinnia's back. Everyone was smiling. Cousins, aunts, uncles. Even I was in it, standing off to the right, a little out of focus, but there. But not Grandma. Her face had been cut out. Literally. The shape of her head had been trimmed clean from the print, leaving a pale void where her smile should have been. The rest of the frame was untouched, polished, celebrated. I stared at the picture for a long time, long enough to feel something sharp climb up my spine. That wasn't an accident. That wasn't some mistake at the printer. That was erasure. I didn't say a word. I walked past the living room and into the kitchen. The fridge was mostly empty, except for condiments and leftover cupcakes. I reached into the cabinet above the microwave and pulled down the bottle of arthritis medication I knew Grandma was running low on. I grabbed my purse, slipped on my shoes, and left through the front door. The nearest pharmacy was 20 minutes away. I drove with the windows cracked, letting the cool air hit my face, trying to clear my thoughts. At the counter, I gave Grandma's name and date of birth. The woman behind the register typed something in, then frowned. "It looks like the payment card on file has been declined. Do you want to pay another way?" I pulled out the joint caregiver card I had access to, one I'd used several times before without issue. She ran it again. Same error. Confused, I stepped aside and called the bank. It took 15 minutes and a lot of elevator music before I got a rep on the line. After security questions, I asked bluntly, "Why isn't this card working? I'm listed as a secondary caregiver for my grandmother, Henrietta Vale." The woman hesitated. "It looks like your name was removed from the account last Thursday by the primary account holder." Thursday. The same day Vera hosted that board meeting in town. I remembered because she made such a fuss about how busy she was and how she couldn't possibly deal with Grandma's meltdowns. "I see," I said, keeping my tone calm. "Can you tell me if a new card was issued?" "Yes," she replied. "To Vera Langford." "Thank you," I said, and hung up. I didn't buy the medication. Not yet. I wanted proof of the financial blockage, and now I had it. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the lights in the house were dimmed. Bryn's car was gone. The only one left was Mom's. I walked quietly inside, not wanting to deal with another confrontation just yet. In my room, I kicked off my shoes, opened my laptop, and started a new folder on my desktop. Folder name, Henrietta Case. I uploaded the scanned documents. I added a typed log of today's pharmacy visit. I wrote down the date I noticed my name was removed from the caregiving account. Then I included a photo of the edited family portrait, just in case I ever needed to explain the emotional manipulation at play. The final piece? A brief recording of Grandma's words from earlier. "They said, if I don't sign soon, they'll move me." I'd recorded it without her knowing, only because something in me felt like I might need it one day. That day had come. When I finally shut the laptop, it was well past midnight. The house was silent, except for the occasional creak of the old floorboards. I stared at the ceiling for a long while, letting everything settle. And then, I picked up my phone. There was one name in my contacts I hadn't used in years, but I remembered it because he once handled a case involving a nursing home where I worked. A good man. Honest. Direct. Detective Calder Nash. I didn't hesitate. I sent the text. "I need to report a case of elder abuse and financial fraud. Can we talk?" I watched the typing bubble appear almost instantly. "Call me in the morning." I smiled faintly. I had one move left, and it started with a phone call to the only person who might believe me. The morning after I sent that message to Detective Calder Nash, the house felt different, not quieter. Quieter would have been peaceful. It felt paused, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for someone else to speak first. Vera wasn't pacing or barking orders. No one asked what I was doing up early. Even Grandma stayed in her room, not because she was afraid, but because we both knew the ground was about to shift. I knocked softly on her door before entering. She was already awake, sitting upright with her lap blanket neatly folded. the blue one with the ducks. Her hands were folded, calm, like she'd been waiting for me. I sat on the edge of her bed and handed her a small mug of chamomile. She took it with a quiet thank you and looked out the window. "I found something," I said softly. Her gaze shifted, curious but cautious. "In your drawer, papers with your name erased, contracts with Mom's name written over, and a notary seal that's fake." She didn't look surprised. That stung more than if she had. "I thought maybe you didn't know what was happening," I continued. "But you did, didn't you?" Still no reply, just a tiny nod. I reached behind her pillow to fluff it, and that's when I felt it. A small piece of paper, folded tight and shoved deep into the case lining. I pulled it out gently and handed it to her. Her eyes widened slightly, and she hesitated before opening it. Her lips pressed together. I couldn't tell if she remembered writing it or just recognized her own fears. I took it from her gently and read aloud. "If they take me, don't forget me. If I disappear, promise you'll look." The words cracked something open in my chest. "Oh, Grandma." My voice broke. I didn't even realize I was crying until the back of my throat tightened and my eyes blurred. All the years of being told I was too emotional, too reactive, too much, it all spilled out in that one moment. She'd written it because she believed no one would come for her, not even me. I took her hand and brought it to my lips. "I'm so sorry, but it ends now." A couple hours later, I stood outside on the front steps, phone in hand, waiting for the call I'd scheduled. At exactly 10 a.m., it rang. "Remiel," the voice on the line said. "It's been a while." "Detective Nash," I replied, clearing my throat. "Thanks for getting back to me." "Always," he said. "You mentioned elder abuse and document fraud?" "Yes," I said. And then I began everything. I told him about the forced isolation, the gaslighting, the financial manipulation, the power of attorney documents forged behind closed doors. I sent photos, scans, time-stamped texts. I described the pattern, the signs, the night in the rain. "I know it sounds unbelievable," I said. "You'd be surprised what I've seen," he replied. A pause, then, "I'll be in town tomorrow. I want to meet you and her. Is she coherent enough to give a statement?" "More than anyone gives her credit for," I answered. We set the time, noon. My heart beat a little faster when I hung up. This was happening, but I wasn't about to wait. By noon that day, I confronted Vera. She was in the dining room, tidying up, pretending she had nothing to hide, polishing the silverware like it would absolve her. "You crossed a line," I said, stepping into the room. She didn't look up. "What now?" "I found the contracts, the ones where you tried to take the house." Still, she didn't flinch. "This isn't abuse. It's family logistics." I dropped the stack of photocopied documents onto the dining table. "Then explain this to a judge." Finally, she looked up, and the look on her face shifted from indifference to something darker. A flicker of fear, of losing control. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice still calm but strained. "No?" I pulled out my phone. "Then explain why my name was removed from the caregiver bank account the same week you filed this. Why Grandma's signature doesn't match. Why she wrote a note asking me not to forget her." She laughed, but it came out brittle. "You've always been dramatic, just like her, emotional. That's why no one listens to either of you." I stepped closer. "They're going to listen now." Just then, a knock came at the front door. Vera flinched. "Who's that?" "Detective Calder Nash. He's here for a statement." Her face drained of color. I opened the door and greeted him with a firm handshake. He was in plain clothes but carried the same quiet authority I remembered, a man who'd seen enough to stop pretending things were always what they seemed. We sat in the living room. He asked questions, took notes. He spoke to me, then to Grandma. Kindly, respectfully. He asked her things directly, waited for her to answer, even when it took a few extra seconds. She told him about the pressure, the confusion, the threats, about how she'd been told she was making things harder for everyone. Vera hovered nearby, trying to jump in. "Ma'am," Nash said, without looking at her, "if you interrupt again, I'll have to ask you to leave the room." She did. After nearly an hour, he closed his notebook. "This could go criminal," he said flatly. "I suggest you cooperate." Vera glared at me like I'd just undone her entire life plan. Later, as I walked Nash out, he gave me a tight smile. "You did the right thing." I nodded, feeling like I could breathe for the first time in days. Back inside, Vera stood near the dining table again, but she wasn't polishing anything now. Her hands were clenched, her voice low and sharp. "You want a war, Elise? You've got one." I stepped into the room fully and looked her dead in the eye. "Good. I stopped being afraid of you when Grandma started eating out of a dog bowl." She blinked, once. Then I turned and walked away. The courthouse bench felt harder than I remembered. Well, it had probably always been that way, but this time, every second waiting made the wood beneath me feel sharper. I sat with Grandma's hand in mine, her thumb gently brushing over mine in slow, small circles, more to soothe me than the other way around. Across the hall, Vera sat stiffly, her spine straight as a ruler, her blouse perfectly pressed. She didn't look at us, not once. She stared straight ahead like she wasn't sitting across from the woman she tried to disappear. "Ms. Vale?" the clerk called out. I stood with Grandma and guided her into the hearing room. It wasn't a trial, not yet, just a review of the guardianship motion and the question of her competency. But everything was riding on this, whether she kept her house, her name, her right to exist in her own life. Inside, the room was warmer than I expected, the lighting soft but the air tense. I helped Grandma into the witness chair. Detective Calder Nash was already seated, his file open in front of him. The judge, an older woman with gray streaks and a calm tone, took her place. The proceedings started slowly. Legalese. Statements. Vera's lawyer gave a practice speech about concern for Henrietta's safety and ensuring structured care. I bit the inside of my cheek. Then it was my turn. I presented the forged documents, the financial records, the statements from the pharmacist and the caregiver log Grandma kept in the drawer that Vera never bothered opening. When the judge asked if Henrietta would like to speak for herself, Grandma cleared her throat, sat up straighter, and said in a voice clearer than it had been in weeks, "I'm not confused, I'm not weak, and I don't want to leave my home." You could have heard a pin drop. After a beat, the judge nodded. She looked over the documents, took a moment longer than expected, and then read aloud. "This court finds that Henrietta Vale is mentally competent and in full control of her estate and affairs. All documents filed on her behalf without her consent are nullified. The home deed remains under her name." A wave of breath rushed out of me. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real. I turned and looked at Vera. Her hands clutched the table edge so tight her knuckles had turned white. She looked pale, stripped, not like someone who had lost a legal battle, but like someone who'd just realized the game she'd designed had slipped through her fingers. But it didn't stop there. Grandma turned in her chair slowly and said, "Your Honor, I'd like to update my will." The judge raised a brow but nodded. "Go ahead, ma'am." "I want everything I own, this house, my savings, everything, to go to my granddaughter, Elise. She's the one who saw me. She's the one who stayed." Vera gasped, rising from her seat. "This is manipulation," she blurted. "She's being coached. This is coercion." The judge didn't even blink. She simply banged the gavel once. "Sit down, Mrs. Langford, or I'll have you removed." I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. But I did reach over and squeeze Grandma's hand once more. When we walked out of that courthouse, the sun had just started to break through the clouds. The air still smelled like rain, but it wasn't heavy anymore. We drove home in silence. I parked in the driveway, walked Grandma up the porch steps, and helped her inside. Then I walked back to my car, opened the glove compartment, and pulled out the official copy of the court order I'd asked for. Vera was waiting in the living room. Her arms were crossed, her eyes rimmed red, but her mouth set in a bitter line. "I'm not leaving," she said before I could speak. "You are," I replied calmly. "You have 24 hours, she scoffed. "You think you can just kick your own mother out?" "I'm not kicking you out," I said. walking over to the front door and taping the official eviction notice to the inside window. The state of Oregon is. Her voice broke slightly. I did everything for this family. I turned to face her fully. You did everything for yourself, at the expense of the people who built the very ground you're standing on. And now, you don't live here anymore. None of you do. Her eyes widened. You can't mean that, she said. I tilted my head. Don't test me. In the next hour, the house slowly emptied. My uncle took down his fishing rods from the garage. Bryn stormed upstairs to grab her phone chargers. Cousins whispered, mouths twisted in confusion, some embarrassed, some indifferent. Vera packed with deliberate slowness, as though dragging the minutes would change the outcome. But by sundown, they were gone. I stood in the doorway of the backyard as the final taillight disappeared down the hill. The patio was littered with forgotten party decor, plastic cups, half-empty cans, a shriveled balloon. I walked through it all. No shoes, just quiet steps over the same stones where my grandmother had once sat, freezing and humiliated. This space used to feel like home only on the surface. Pretty on holidays, pleasant for photos, but now it felt honest. I bent down and picked up the old family photo that had been cut, the one where Grandma had been sliced out. I walked out front, where Vera was stuffing the last suitcase into the back seat of her car. Without a word, I placed the photo on the driveway in front of her tire. She looked down, scowled, and started to move it aside. Read the back, I said. She flipped it over. On the back, I had written in permanent ink, "Don't worry." I kept the original. She looked up at me, and for the first time in my adult life, I saw her hesitate, really hesitate, not out of fear, out of recognition, out of the realization that she had underestimated me. I didn't speak. She drove off, and for the first time in years, the house felt like it belonged to someone who remembered why it mattered. Autumn came gently that year, the kind of season that doesn't rush in with fanfare, but slowly brushes the trees with rust-colored leaves and invites the wind to speak softer. It had been almost 12 months since the day I watched Vera's car turn out of the driveway and disappear for good. And now, here we were. Grandma and I stood side by side at the kitchen counter, aprons dusted with flour, fingers sticky from the cinnamon rolls we were rolling tight with extra sugar. The house didn't creak the same way anymore. Maybe it was because of the new insulation, or maybe it was something less tangible, something about peace settling into the walls after years of holding its breath. She moved a little slower these days, but her laughter still filled the room. She didn't bake like she used to, not for long stretches, but she still insisted on being the one to check the dough. "That's not soft enough," she'd say, poking the top. "Start again." There was a new photo on the mantel. Just the two of us, standing in the garden, holding a basket of cherry tomatoes. Her smile in that photo was real. Not the forced, polite kind she used to wear when Vera directed family pictures like a film set. This one was different, honest, settled. Outside the kitchen window, the backyard had transformed. Where the old party tables once stood, lined with wine glasses and laughter that excluded, there were now raised garden beds. Tomatoes, squash, rosemary, things that took time and care and reminded us that growth isn't always loud. Every corner of the house had become a patch of restoration. The spare room Vera used as her office was now a reading nook with Grandma's bookshelves. The patio, where she'd once sat drenched and discarded, was now covered and lined with hanging plants, a bench swing, and wind chimes she picked out herself. The silence had changed, too. It used to mean fear, isolation. Now it meant something closer to serenity. There were still moments, of course. There were days when Grandma forgot where she put her glasses, or what day of the week it was. Once, she called me by my mother's name and looked so mortified she nearly cried. I just smiled, kissed her forehead, and said, "It's okay. I'll always come when you call." She rarely asked about Vera, and when she did, it was only once, gently. "Do you think she's angry?" I answered honestly. "Probably, but that's not yours to carry anymore." I hadn't heard from Vera since the court ruling. No emails, no voicemails, no letters pretending to be apologies. And honestly, that was fine. I didn't need her remorse. I didn't need to win anything. All I ever wanted was for Grandma to feel safe and seen. One morning, as I brought her breakfast on a white ceramic plate, the same plate Vera once said was too good to waste on oatmeal, Grandma looked at me with eyes full of tears. "You still see me," she said softly. I sat beside her. "I always did. They just didn't let me show it." She took my hand and squeezed it. Later that week, while sorting through boxes in the attic, I came across one of Grandma's old journals. The spine was faded, and the corners curled from years of use. Inside were pages of daily observations, grocery lists, and little reflections scribbled in the margins. And then, midway through, I found a line boxed in pencil. "Home is not where they let you in, it's where they never forget to wait for you." I closed the book and held it against my chest. The next day, I painted the line onto a small wooden plaque and hung it above the front porch, just to the left of the doorbell. That Saturday, Doris Clem stopped by with her famous pumpkin bread. She hadn't knocked yet. She never did. Not since last winter when she said, "I figure the door's open now, one way or another." We sat on the porch swing, Grandma between us, all of us wrapped in soft throws, watching the leaves fall in slow spirals. The scent of nutmeg drifted from the kitchen, and the distant chime of the wind bells filled the space between words. As the sun began to dip behind the hills, a light rain began to fall, soft, rhythmic. Grandma reached for my hand. I took it without thinking. From inside the house, the warm glow of the entryway lights spilled onto the porch steps. And then, the doorbell rang. I stood to answer it. No one was left outside anymore. Sometimes family isn't about who shares your last name. It's about who shows up when it matters most. This story reminds us that silence can be as cruel as any word, and love, real love, fights back when it needs to. Have you ever seen someone in your family being slowly pushed aside? What did you do? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, where the quiet ones finally find their voice.